Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to the Near Memo with today Mike Blumenthal and me, Greg Sterling. David Mim is out, and this is episode 121, remarkably, amazingly, in which we talk about local search, social, commerce, antitrust, privacy, AI, what we had for breakfast, whatever else is top of mind, which makes this a beautiful experience for everyone involved, I'm sure. Um, it's not entirely true that we're just being totally extemporaneous and improvising, but it's largely the case. We do a little tiny hint of planning here at the margins. Okay,
We
so
both do a lot of thinking during the week. That counts for something.
all right, I'm quite neurotic, and so I'm always thinking about different things, including technology. So actually, I'm a lot less neurotic than I used to be. So the first
I'm
item
glad to hear.
on
I'm
today,
glad to hear that, Greg, and I'm sure
yes,
our listeners are too.
they are glad, and there are probably some people that have known me for 20 years, and they can probably attest to that. So the first item here is there's a lot of stuff that we could talk about, but the thing that I wanted to sort of bring up is an interesting uh, quarterly survey that Jungle Scout does on basically e-commerce and spending, consumer spending. And there are a lot of things in the report. I wrote about it, as I said, on Wednesday. The thing that was most striking to me was a year over year change in terms of where people started their product search process. So this has always been a topic of discussion. 70%, 50%, 60% of people start their product search on Amazon. And this has been a real challenge to Google, which, for years now has been the number two place. Certainly getting lots and lots of product search traffic and lots of retail related ad revenue, but they have not been the number one, the starting place for product search. And they want to be able to say that to their advertisers. And so they've invested enormous amounts of time, energy, money into supplement, just enhancing, product ads, shopping ads.
Integrating with e-commerce, integrating with local
Yes,
businesses,
yes,
buying
exactly. The merchant
pointy
center,
merchant
right?
center.
All the
Right.
all the effort to bring offline inventory online. I mean, all of which is valuable to the consumer, certainly. But the thing that showed up in this Scout report was a decline in the usage of Amazon and Google. I mean, it says search engine, but it's Google as the starting point for product search. This does not talk about if people are using multiple sites or sources where Amazon and Google fall in the hierarchy. They are the number one and number two places as a starting point. But Amazon lost 4 points year over year from Q2 2022 to Q2 2023, from 61% of people who start their product searches on Amazon to 57% of people. And Google, interestingly, went from 49%, which is kind of strange because that's more than 100%. But what it represents is people using both tools, I guess, 49% to 42%. So a 7 point decline.
Over
Um,
what time frame?
1 year, year over year,
1 year.
Q2 last year to Q2 this year. And correspondingly, Walmart saw some gains, but social media collectively saw 14 points of growth. YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and I think Pinterest. Pinterest was flat, but TikTok grew 6 points. It was the one that gained the most, which makes sense because TikTok has become more popular, and Instagram grew 3 points. Facebook also grew a couple of points, and YouTube grew 3 points. So what this represents to me, and we'll see if it holds, we'll see next quarter what happens and subsequent quarters. What this represents to me is frustration or dissatisfaction with Amazon and Google, at least at the margins, and then a shift to social media as a way, as an alternative way to get information about products, which goes into the credibility of, product information, product reviews, the user experience that people are having on Google and Amazon. We'll be talking about reviews in your section, Mike, but what we see consistently in the survey data now is increasing awareness of review fraud, and certain amount of skepticism about that, which we can debate the accuracy of those findings. But this seems to be some sort of behavioral proof that people are not getting what they need from Amazon and Google to the same degree that they were, and so they're looking outside of those places for product inspiration, information that is sort of similar, evaluation, product evaluations or recommendations. And I
It
just I
may
just
not
find it
reflect dissatisfaction with Amazon and Google. It may reflect satisfaction with wherever they're hanging out.
with
If they're hanging out
yes
on
with
YouTube, or they're
TikTok,
hanging
for
out on
example. Yeah.
TikTok, it may be, well,
Well,
I
it's
can, as long as I'm here, I might as well look, right? Kind of attitude. Um,
it's interesting because I mean, the real answer is that all of these things are being used. It's an all of the above proposition, because people don't simply use Google, nor do they simply use Amazon, nor do they simply use YouTube. Is that they look at all these places and try and get a consensus view, or try and get more information to make their own decision. But it's not, it's much less efficient to use something like TikTok than it is to use Google or Amazon as a product search engine. I mean, TikTok will give you individual opinions of particular products, and sometimes that can be very, very helpful depending on the video. But it's much less efficient if you're looking to figure out what kind of pet snacks to buy, or where's the best price to get the particular pet snack, which is something that I have to buy fairly shortly, in short order, for my dog. Going to Amazon, going to Google is much more efficient than it is to go to TikTok and try and look up the same product and see whether a single individual liked it. So I see some dissatisfaction and frustration playing out in the people turning to social media as an alternative way to get information. Um,
it would be interesting. We've been doing a lot of consumer research and tracking, actually watching consumers work on Google. It would be interesting for us to assign the problem of product acquisition and watching how users go about making that decision. Um, so,
Right. I mean, they're obviously looking at prices. They're looking at reviews. They're looking at images. I mean, there was Brody Clark had a very interesting post case study about how Foot Locker got more of its thumbnails into Google, and this is kind of an aside. Uh, Having more pictures improved traffic, and I'm conjecturing clicks and conversions, because that's helpful. That's what people want to see. So the more information that's out there, sort of the better for people. But it's become uh, quite burdensome in many cases, because there is so much information to make certain kinds of product choices or certain kinds of service business choices. But I just found it interesting that there seems to be some shifting towards social, and maybe away from Google and Amazon at the margins, as a kind of a primary resource, which brings up
and that's
which go
despite
yeah,
Google's massive investment in product search and local
huge.
product search, huge investment. Right.
Well, and I think Google needs to keep going with local product inventory. I mean, I think that's a critical thing if it's really going to compete with Amazon, or if it's going to better compete with Amazon. Because one of the reasons why people go to Amazon is because they don't know where to get a product, or because they assume that Amazon will have the product, and if local inventory is available, that represents some sort of alternative that people are lazy. People will do the path of least resistance, and in many cases that's Amazon. And if you give them an alternative, they chances are they'll use that. But I wanted to make one other point and a half. Yesterday, Google released earnings. They did very well. Their stock went up. I don't know where it is today. Um, the ad spending seems to be returning. They're a beneficiary. One of the reasons that they're a beneficiary of sort of a macro trend toward increased ad spending is because they're a search monopoly. They're not a monopoly on the display side, and their network underperformed. But YouTube and search did better than expected, because in those areas, even though you could argue that TikTok is encroaching on YouTube. In those areas, they have a virtual or quasi monopoly. And what we talked about before we got started today is how increasingly, whether it's Google, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Twitter, there are other sites probably that fall into this category. Increasingly, we're confronted with these monopolies or quasi monopolies or de facto dominant sites that people are profoundly ambivalent about, but they have to use in their minds because there isn't really an alternative. Twitter still is sort of in that category. Google certainly in that category. Amazon in that category. Um, you know, prime growth has plateaued in the United States, and there's some indication that it's even in decline. And I think that we're in a situation where a lot of the tools that we use, a lot of the sites that we use, a lot of the things that we rely upon, we have this very ambivalent relationship about, and we don't feel that there are a lot of alternatives. Now, on the B2B side, there's a lot of competition, a lot of alternatives, but it's interesting that we're here in this place right now, and there's pent up demand for alternatives, but nobody is breaking through either with some search alternative. There was a whole article on The Verge about Neva, how they couldn't break through. There's nothing really to challenge Amazon. Walmart, maybe some of the big boxes, but not really. And Twitter so far, Twitter is the most vulnerable, but still it's hanging on because nobody has broken through with a consensus alternative. So that was sort of a rambling conclusion to that discussion.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.